Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. Now throughout January, as I'm sure you already know, I'm trying to answer as many of your questions in videos like this as I possibly can. Today's question is one that I've taken from live chat from one of my previous streams and a video that I've wanted to do for a while now. A video I'm calling The Curious Case of Nico Hulkenberg. Yes, that's cheesy and possibly a little bit cringy, but it kind of sums up how I feel about him as a driver. Heading all the way back to the beginning then, he signed for Williams as the reigning GP2 champion back in 2010, and before he even turned a wheel in anger in Formula 1, he was already been linked with a seat at Ferrari. And as I personally remember, he was a very, very highly rated prospect. He had a solid debut season in a car that really wasn't that amazing, and of course he also took pole position at the Brazilian Grand Prix, yes in mixed conditions, but just highlighting what he could do as a driver. Despite that, for whatever reason, he was dropped in 2011 by Williams before joining Force India in 2012, and once again, he was quick and consistent and proved just what he could do. In 2013, he then went on to join Sauber for one season, and at that time, it was quite clear to everybody he was going to get a Ferrari seat. Sauber had that Ferrari backing. Nico Hulkenberg would be partnering Fernando Alonso in 2014. Discussions took place, negotiations went on, but Ferrari ultimately decided to go with Kimi Räikkönen and bring the Finn back to the team that he had left, or to be fair, had been sacked from. And let's not forget as well, at that same time, he was also heavily linked with seats at McLaren and Red Bull, but ultimately neither of those came to anything as well. I will say at this point, and it's worth noting, I would 110% have put Nico Hulkenberg in that car ahead of Kimi Räikkönen. Not a knock at Kimi, but Nico Hulkenberg deserved it at that point in his career. So why did Ferrari overlook the Hulk? It may well be that they felt that Kimi Räikkönen was the better driver, the quicker driver, but of course in 2014 all the regulations were changing and driver weight and height became a big issue for the main teams, mainly because the engines were heavier than they initially expected them to be, and of course with the minimum weight limit going up, that gave teams massive problems. For those who maybe don't know the numbers behind it, it's worth knowing that for every extra kilo an F1 car carries, it loses around 0.035 seconds per lap. So at the time, Nico Hulkenberg weighed around 74 kilos and Kimi Räikkönen was just 70 kilos. With the German in the car, Ferrari would have lost around about 0.14 seconds per lap. So on paper, it was a no-brainer. And as we saw in 2014, Ferrari could not afford to lose any more time. So aside from Ferrari maybe seeing Kimi as a better driver or the weight issue, I actually have a theory that I've always kind of maintained. This is just my thought and just my opinions. I'm probably so far off as I often am with my opinions, but it is just a thought. How far into the future were Ferrari looking? It was widely known and reported that Alonso was at the end of his tether with Ferrari, and Ferrari were equally just as fed up with Fernando Alonso. And we all pretty much knew at the time that Ferrari were very, very long admirers of Sebastian Vettel. Could it be then that Ferrari saw the idea of two drivers of the same nationality in the same team as detrimental to their marketing and PR opportunities? It's just a thought, but it may well have been taken into account if they were already looking at Sebastian Vettel to replace Fernando Alonso. And of course, with the relationship that Seb and Kimi already shared, perhaps that was taken into account as well. Having missed out on that Ferrari seat, he then returned to Force India for 2014 and stayed for 3 seasons. Once again, as I will keep saying through this, proving his speed and his consistency. And of course, we all know what he achieved and again proved at Le Mans in 2015. He was also, of course, briefly linked with the vacant seat at Mercedes following Nico Rosberg's retirement. However, he was again overlooked. Obviously then Nico Hulkenberg joined Renault for the 2017 season. He did have some interesting things to say after he signed, and I am going to read the quotes here because I actually really, really like them. And it kind of sums him up quite nicely as a personality as well. He said, "My goal was to drive for a manufacturer. That's what I've achieved with Renault. We both have unfulfilled goals. If you don't drive for Ferrari or Mercedes, there is no coverage and the driver performance is not as linked with the car performance. Nevertheless, I feel a lot of respect for my performance, especially internationally." I just love that quote. Like I say, it sums him up perfectly as a driver and as a personality. Reliability issues aside, he had a pretty good 2017 to be fair. And there were a couple of races, I believe Singapore, and obviously if he'd have kept it together in Baku, where he could have ended up on the podium, but unfortunately, in 2017, he broke the unwanted and undeserved record, in my opinion, for the most Grand Prix entered without securing a podium. A baffling statistic for a driver that has been so highly regarded for so long. To the crux of the video then, and that is, will Nico Hulkenberg ever make it to a top team or even grab that elusive podium? The problem is, he's falling further and further down that pecking order. We've already got drivers like Verstappen, Ocon, Ricciardo, Sainz. They're all in the sport and are already a more attractive prospect than the German. And if you add to that the huge amount of talent in lower categories such as, I don't know, Fuoco, Roland, Giovinazzi, Markelov, Russell, Norris, I could go on. At 30 years old, it is unlikely that he's going to be a top priority for any of the big teams. And once again, that is so frustrating and so unfair to say in some ways. He's a fantastic racing driver, he's quick, he's consistent, he is good enough and deserves a shot with a top team. But I just don't see him getting the shout at, say, Mercedes ahead of Ocon. Let's just play devil's advocate for a second and say Lewis Hamilton retires at the end of 2018. Do Mercedes put Hulkenberg in that car? Unlikely. As I was just saying, without any doubt in my mind, Ocon will be the next driver to move to Mercedes. And if, massive if, Lewis Hamilton did retire, Mercedes would look to keep Bottas on rather than them bringing in 2 new drivers to the team. Let's not forget as well, talking about drivers that could fill Lewis Hamilton's seat, we'll talk about what I'm going to call the Verstappen effect. Ferrari and Mercedes will try everything to get him in their car, and Red Bull will fight as hard as they can to keep him in the car, no doubt. I mean, right now, if I'm being honest, just moving on to Verstappen very quickly, I believe that, as they did with Schumacher, Raikkonen, Alonso and Vettel, Ferrari have already had words and earmarked Verstappen for the future. So the point is, these seats are already closing off at the top. Hulkenberg's best hope is that Renault surprise all of us and get a decent engine and a decent chassis very soon, maybe in 2018, and can compete with the top 3-4 teams. The other problem he's got with Renault is they've already got their own very impressive young driver program, and there are some potential big names of the future in Formula One right there, and they are going to be snapping at his heels for that seat. I mean, he could land a podium in the future. I mean, Renault, as I've just said, need to surprise us all with a good car. They might get their act together. Plus, if you get a crazy race like Baku, for example, he could do it. And these things do happen. These crazy races do happen. One thing is for sure, though, he absolutely deserves a podium. And I firmly believe, as I've said multiple times in this video, deserves a shot with a top team. It is frustrating to see him getting continually overlooked for those top seats. The problem is, though, you have to look at it from, say, Mercedes' point of view, Ferrari's point of view. With so much talent out there, they have to make the right choice. Not just for the now, but also for the future. It is becoming a bigger thing in F1 now to build teams around young drivers and look to the long term. And you could probably say that Nico Hulkenberg is just in that unfortunate position of being in the right place at the wrong time. And sadly, in my honest opinion, it looks as though Nico Hulkenberg is going to fall into that awkward void that so many drivers have ended up in throughout Formula One history. He's too good for the midfield, but not quite good enough, or at least enough of an attractive prospect for a top team to take him on. They are just my opinions, though. What do you think of Nico Hulkenberg, and where do you see him in the future? Let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to pop your questions in there so I can answer them in a dedicated video like this. I will try and do as many as I can through the rest of January. I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget to follow me on social media. Links to Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and all of that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.